How different are DC movies to the comics they're based on? DC has been writing comics for over 90 years with thousands of stories and characters. As for the live action movies, there have been a number of motion pictures set in all sorts of different universes, from Christopher Reeve's Superman to Matt Reeves' Batman, the DCEU, and whatever universe this Joker is in. So let's find out how different these characters and stories are in the comics to their adaptations in those movies.
Here we go.
Clark Kent's adoptive father originally died of natural causes in the comics as opposed to a tornado in Man of Steel. After Superman's death in the comics, he's revived by a Kryptonian artifact known as the Eradicator before his body is placed in a regeneration matrix within the Fortress of Solitude. In the Justice League film, the Mother Box is responsible for bringing Kal-El back to life. When Superman was brought back to life, he emerged in a black suit. While the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League did that, they didn't give the character a mullet like he had in the comics. Memory Wipe Kiss was an original power given to Superman in 1980's Superman II, as was the Cellophane S, and the ability to rebuild the Great Wall of China with his eyes, as seen as Superman IV, The Quest for Peace. Smallville was always located in an unknown American state until Superman the movie, which first defined it being in Kansas. Superman's suit often has red underwear or red belt in the comics, but in the DCEU, there was no red in that area on his costume. Wonder Woman was originally made from clay in the comics, but in the movies, she's the daughter of Zeus. Her origin is centered around the World War sequel in the comics, but the original World War in the Wonder Woman movie. In that film, she was told that if she left Themyscira to fight, she would not be able to return, but she's left and returned many times in the comics with no problem. The invisible jet is just a vehicle she has in the comics, not a pre-existing vehicle that she made disappear. In the DCEU, Wonder Woman works in a museum, a job she's never had in the comics. The Dreamstone, as seen in Wonder Woman 1984, has no link to Maxwell Lord in the books, nor Wonder Woman. The Flash movie is loosely based on the Flashpoint comic, but Superman's involvement is replaced with Supergirl. The main villain in that story arc is the Reverse Flash, but in the movie it's Alternate Universe Flash or Dark Flash. Another slight character change is having Bruce Wayne's Batman instead of Thomas Wayne's Batman. Victor Stone lost his body to an interdimensional monster in the comics, but a car crash in the movies. He was also saved and became cyborg thanks to his father equipping him with experimental cybernetic technology, as opposed to the Mother Box in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. His powers also evolve and upgrade over time, rather than immediately having them all from his creation. Shazam's name was originally Captain Marvel, although DC never actually owned the name Captain Marvel. The character was created by Fawcett Publications, who were later bought by DC, but had to change the name to Shazam after Marvel Comics trademarked Captain Marvel. Amanda Waller has never really had any involvement with the Justice Society in the comics, as she does in Black Adam. This is the same with the Justice League. In the DCEU, it seems like she has the heroes on speed dial, calling in Superman to confront Black Adam in the mid-credit scene. Al Rothstein was always the Atom Smasher. The Black Adam movie implied there was a second Al who wore the suit before him. This person was his uncle, however, no such family member has ever made reference in the comics. Maxine Hunkel's Cyclone inherited her powers from her grandmother, who was able to control the weather. In Black Adam, she got her powers from a scientist who injected her with nanobots. In the comics, Jamie Ray's Blue Beetle grew up in El Paso as opposed to Palmyra City in the Blue Beetle movie. The character got his powers when he was a teenager, however in the film, he had already graduated college by the time he got the Scarab. When Jamie got his powers, his family had a front row seat to witness the transformation, but in the comics, he kept it a secret from them. His father, Alberto Reyes, has never died in the comics like he did in the movie. Alan Scott was the first Green Lantern, but the movie version was Hal Jordan. Green Lantern's suit has green gloves, but were originally and most often seen as white in the comics. While Martian Manhunter has had a number of aliases in the comics, none of them have been General Calvin Swanwick like it was in the DCEU. Aquaman having tattoos is a modern addition added to the DCEU. Volko was never a mentor figure to Aquaman in the comics. Dr. Stephen Shin did, however, mentor Arthur Curry in the comics, but in the movie, he started out sinister. The bat branding seen in Batman v Superman is something unique to the movies. Batman tries to live by the rule of not killing unless absolutely necessary. However, Ben Affleck's version in particular is extremely reckless and has killed people he probably didn't need to in order to still save others. Bruce Wayne learned his martial arts skill traveling all around the world, whereas in Batman Begins, it was primarily learnt through Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows. Most of Batman's gadgets are self-made, but in the Dark Knight trilogy, they were developed by Lucius Fox at Wayne Enterprises. Bruce Wayne's parents were killed on the way home from watching a movie. While this is depicted in some of the films, in Batman Begins, they were leaving the theatre. Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul share a child named Damian Wayne in the comics, but in her Dark Knight Rises appearance, her relationship and life don't last long enough for that to happen. Bruce Wayne's relationship with Rachel Dawes doesn't exist in the comics, mainly due to her being an original character created for Batman Begins. His first love interest was Julie Madison, but her only appearance in live action is in Batman and Robin, where Bruce had already dated many characters. Bruce Wayne discourages alcohol use, but will occasionally pretend to drink it. However, in the DCEU, I don't think this is apple juice. Let's talk about some team differences. The first members of Birds of Prey were Black Canary and Barbara Gordon in the books, but in Birds of Prey in the Way Too Long title, it was Black Canary, Huntress, and Renee Montoya. And maybe Harley Quinn and Cassandra Cain too? Suicide Squad's first team in the comics was physicist Jess Bright, astronomer Dr. Hugh Evans, team leader Rick Flag Jr., and flight medic Karen Grace. In the movies, all those characters were replaced with Deadshot, Harley Quinn, Rick Flag, Captain Boomerang, El Diablo, Killer Croc, Katana, and Slipknot. Briefly, the original Justice League team in the comics consisted of Superman, Batman, Aquaman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, and Wonder Woman. The movie replaced Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter with Cyborg. While the formation of the Justice League was more natural in the comics, coming together organically, in the DCEU, Batman and Wonder Woman take on a more recruiting role. They also weren't the first superhero team on page, like they were on screen. That title belonged to the Justice Society, who were first introduced in the Black Adam movie. Speaking of who, that first lineup consisted of Dr. Fate, Hourman, The Spectre, Sandman, Adam, The Flash, Green Lantern, and Hawkman. The movie had half of these, but also added Cyclone and the Atom Smasher. Let's talk about the villains. The first supervillain that the characters fought is largely different from comics to screen for each. The first Justice League villain was Starro the Conqueror in the comics, but Steppenwolf in the movie. The first Suicide Squad villain was Red Wave Beast in the comics, but Enchantress and Incubus in the movie. Superman's was Ultra Humanate, but took on Lex Luthor. Batman's was Dr. Death, but fought the Joker, Riddler, Penguin, and Catwoman. In Batman 1989, the person who killed Bruce Wayne's parents is Jack Napier, who later becomes the Joker, but in the comics, it was Joe Chill. The Joker's origin is left ambiguous in the comics, but the 1989 movie gives him a clear backstory, as does the Joker movie from 2019. In the 2016 Suicide Squad movie, the Joker has tattoos, something not really associated with the character in the comics. This is the same with the movie version of Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn's hyenas are named Bud and Lou on page, as opposed to Bruce on screen. Harvey Two-Face's scarring was the result of fuel and fire in The Dark Knight, but acid in Detective Comics issue 66. Joker also had no involvement in the change of this physical appearance. Barbara Minerva's transformation into Cheetah came from a wish in Wonder Woman 1984, as opposed to a curse in the comics. Lex Luthor is portrayed as a more erratic tech genius in Batman v Superman, as opposed to a powerful business person or corrupt politician. He also goes bald via shaving in prison, rather than it being the result of a lab experiment leading to a chemical explosion. Antonio Diego is the name of the criminal who becomes Bane in Batman and Robin, but his real alias is unknown in the comics. In that movie, Dr. Jason Woodrue is the one responsible for administering the Venom Serum to transform Antonio into Bane, but Woodrue had no involvement in the comics. As for Bane's appearance in The Dark Knight Rises, no Venom Serum was injected at all. His powers instead are natural through hard work and determination. The Penguin is more of a criminal mastermind and cunning business person, but Tim Burton's Batman Returns doesn't really present this side of the character. Doomsday was created by alien scientist Bertram, not Lex Luthor. Bertram did experiments on a humanoid infant, which saw it be killed over and over until it evolved into Doomsday. Lex used General Zod's body, Krypton tech, and his own blood. Parallax's design in the 2011 Green Lantern movie took the Galactus in 2007's Rise of the Silver Surfer approach, but it looks vastly different in the comics. In that same movie, Hector Hammond was a high school science teacher rather than being a petty criminal. Black Manta built his suit in the comics, but his augments of advanced Atlantean technology in the Aquaman movies. Maxwell Lord's power-hungry nature came from a gene bomb that gave him mind control powers rather than using the Dreamstone. He's the CEO of Black Gold Corporative, but no such company exists in the comics, instead being most known as the former business magnate and manager of the Justice League International and current leader of the spy organization Checkmate. The permanent death of characters is very uncommon in the comics. However, in the movies, the 1989 Joker is definitively deceased. General Zod ain't coming back either, nor is Talia al Ghul. The fight between Batman and Superman ends with Batman faking a heart attack rather than their mothers having the same name. Steve Trevor survived multiple wartime events in the comics, but only managed one in the Wonder Woman film. Betty Kane was the original Batgirl in the comics. Barbara Wilson first portrayed the character in the movies. Barbara Wilson is also an original character created for Batman and Robin. She's Alfred Pennyworth's niece in the movie, but the only known niece he has in the comics is Daphne Pennyworth. Dick Grayson was only 11 when he became Robin in the comics, while Chris O'Donnell would have been 24 at the time of filming Batman Forever. While John Blake never officially becomes Robin in the Dark Knight trilogy, it's heavily implied. This is not something that happens in the comics, primarily due to Blake being an original character created for the film. Some other notable original characters created exclusively for the movies include Shrek, not to be confused with Shrek, CeeLo Cazo, aka Ratcatcher II, Otis from Superman, Victoria Cord as seen in Blue Beetle, like Jenny Cord, and Uncle Rudy. Basically every character in the 2004 Catwoman movie, like the main villain, Laurel Hedder, and the main character, Patience Phillips. The mother boxes were cuboid shaped in the comics rather than being cubes in Justice League. They're also a lot smaller, something that can be held in one hand. And finally, DC Comics are pictures with text, whereas DC movies are moving pictures with sound.
Wow, is that right?
I think it's fair to say that the DC movies are inspired by the comics, rather than being direct adaptations of the comics. While there are many differences, there are also a lot of similarities. Overall, I think DC does a great job at making both the comics and movies their own thing. But one similarity between the two is that the comics and movie universes are always rebooting. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favorite DC movie is. And don't forget to absolutely obliterate that like, subscribe, and share button. I'm just kidding. Only do it with enough force that it registers. I don't want any of you breaking whatever device you're watching this on.